TSN's Motoring 96 is brought to you by Quaker State. Exceeds the highest standards for engine protection. And Midas, the way it should be.
There's no doubt that buying a new vehicle can be an exciting time. It can also be rather scary. I mean, here we are about to spend some hard-earned cash on an investment that will be worth less money the minute we drive it off this parking lot. So obviously, we want to make the right choice. Now, they say the biggest selling feature today in cars is safety, which usually translates into how many airbags does the vehicle have. But as I've said before, manufacturers are now loading vehicles today with something called active safety. Things like ABS brakes, better suspension handling, etc. So hopefully you will avoid that accident in the first place. But these features can only be experienced with the test drive. So this week we're asking the question, what should you and I expect in a test drive at the dealership, and what should the dealers be prepared to offer us? In a perfect world, we'd all buy lunch for Motoring's Graeme FLETCHER and ask Graeme to conduct our test drives. Now, although Graeme's not one to turn down a free lunch, I wouldn't hold my breath on the test drive. But when it comes to advice, Graeme is first in line.
Well, you have to drive the vehicle in a manner which mirrors your everyday driving habits. If you drive on the highway 95% of the time and the dealer allows you to drive around the block, you're wasting your time. The other thing, if you do drive a vehicle around the block and it happens to be available for sale, you might consider buying that one. You've listened for all the rattles and squeaks. You can take a quick once around the vehicle to find out if it's been repainted or it was damaged in transit. If everything is okay, you have the advantage of seeing the vehicle before you sign on the dotted line, and that can be worth its weight in gold, because trying to get a vehicle replaced after the fact, not a hope in Hades.
Who should dictate where you're going to go and for how long, you or the dealer?
Oh, it'll definitely be me. If the dealer tries to persuade me to go his specific route, I will try and go mine. And if he then changes his mind and says no, this way, then I shall turn around and go right back to the dealership and say thank you very much and walk away.
If he won't let you drive it for a long enough period, my suggestion, go and rent a car. You can rent just about any make or model now, and the $30 or $40 it's going to cost you for the day is money very well invested.
Ayako and Joel are considering buying a Subaru Impreza. It's a 1993 model, and they have spent considerable time doing a visual inspection prior to the test drive. Is it an enjoyable experience buying a car or not?
Never enjoyable.
Why is that?
Oh, it's just a lot of tension. You know, it's a lot of stress buying a vehicle. It's a big investment. It's hard to be 100% sure whether it's a car for you, so it's never a good experience. Now, what does this thing do?
Economy and performance mode. It changes the shifting of your transmission. So if you choose the economy mode, it's just going to give you better fuel economy.
It's not going to shift at a higher rev. It's going to shift at a lower rev.
That's right.
You notice the real major things. I mean, you're not going to buy a car without driving it, but it's important for Ayako because she really wants to feel comfortable driving the car. And I had driven one of these before, so I didn't need to drive it today.
Usually you're looking at newspaper or something, so you don't know anything about the car, just how they look and stuff. So I want to make sure that they don't have any rust, and size of the car, and can they turn quick. You want to be comfortable, so that's the kind of thing I'm looking at.
Salesman in the car or out of the car?
I would have preferred the salesman out of the car because you're gonna put it through. Drive it a little harder and really test the brakes, and I would say out of the car.
Don't take this personally, but some customers say they don't want the salesman in the back seat or beside them.
Well, what we say and what we do are two different things, because we're not as bad as we're made out to be, and you actually things won't move without salespeople, and it's a necessary. I won't say the word, but it's necessary to have a salesperson.
Frank Appa would be more than happy to allow his customers a solo test drive, but admits that insurance companies are making that practice difficult.
To the point now that they've made it mandatory that proof of driver's license must be taken by the dealership before anyone can go for a test drive. A company employee must accompany a customer on a test drive. And actually, things that people on test drives, people are switching keys. Dealers have now been instructed by their insurance carriers not to allow the customer to handle the keys. During a test drive, what may happen is someone accidentally opens the trunk. The car then pulls over to the side of the road. When the salesperson gets out to close the trunk, the person drives away with the vehicle. So there's many more illustrations, but I don't think it's wise to discuss them.
But despite these perils, Saab has introduced a program that would allow customers possession of a vehicle for up to 5 days.
We really just spend the time with the customer, first of all, to go over the car, to do the interview and find out what actually suits the customer. So it's not a kind of thing where they're just driving in and going away for a car for a week. We're really getting a chance to find out what car we have that suits them. And then they get an extended test drive, which might be over a weekend or maybe a 2 or 3 day period during the middle of the week, or whatever sort of suits their lifestyle best, so they can really get a good feel for the car.
Any obligation, or do they feel obligated, and does that work maybe to your favor?
I think clients that are really in the market do feel obligated to the extent that they've taken your car for 3 or 4 days. But with saying that, if the car doesn't suit them, customers soon tell you. I don't think it's an obligation to the point where they feel they have to buy it.
For the most part, it's a very competitive market today, and the way you get additional business is to allow people to, the people that are not sure exactly it's the right car and it doesn't maybe hit them as that day being a particular purchase they have to make, is you let them have it for a little while, and that they get a chance to show it to their friends, and people say, oh, you're looking at one, and it almost manifests into a purchase with certain people. So every deal's different, but quite often it's the overnight that actually closes the deal for us.
If I take a Jag, I get in an accident, what's the liability? Who's at risk here?
We are really. It's on our insurance, it's our deductible, and touch wood, we haven't had the problem yet, and it's 22 years of business, but I guess it'll happen, and you just have to spread that over 22 years and take your lumps.
This week on Test Drive, we take a look at a very big truck. This is the all-new F-150 from Ford. Why big? Well, redesigning the best-selling vehicle in North America at any time is a risky venture, never mind when the economy is in crisis. The other reason it's big, you need a stepladder or mountaineering experience to get in. Not since testing the Hummer have so many people taken the time out to examine every facet of this new truck, even the minutiae. The 4x4 off-road package on this F-150 adds skid plates, raises the body, gives you tow hooks, and a mammoth set of 17-inch wheels with a good set of mudders on them. The problem? Why didn't we go off-road? Because they've only put a 16-inch spare when you've got 17-inch wheels. Now, if you get a puncture out here, that could be the difference between getting stuck and getting home. I also think it adds insult to injury when they ding you for almost $1,600 for the off-road package. The F-150 is also big because of the quantum improvements engineered into the design. The revised front suspension now features a short, long-arm, double wishbone design with torsion bars, gas pressurized shocks, and a stabilizer bar. The rear suspension utilizes variable rate multi-leaf springs and gas pressurized shocks. Ditching the twin I-beam suspension on the F-150 is probably the best thing Ford have done. Now consumers that use this type of vehicle for anything less than commercial don't have to worry about scrubbing out the outside edges of the tyres. Secondly, the ride comfort has taken a quantum leap for the better. And thirdly, there's a distinct lack of that usual pitching motion you get when you have a relatively short wheelbase and a high centre of gravity. When it comes to handling, again, while you still know you're driving a truck, the F-150 surprised. Body roll is acceptable, especially given the ride height, and only if you goose it mid-corner does the back end begin to break away. The steering also contributes, offering a crisp and positive feel, meaning that even at speed there is a degree of stability that belies the fact that this is a pickup truck. Also improved are the power plants, and vastly so. The Triton engine is based upon the 4.6-litre modular V8 Ford use in many other applications and is the unit of choice. While the horsepower stays the same as the base V6 at 210, it is produced at a much more user-friendly 4,400 RPM, while torque is boosted to 290 pounds-feet. This engine is, without question, the smoothest unit available in a pickup, partly because of the work put into reducing noise, vibration and harshness, and partly because of the engine's inherent qualities. The idle quality, for example, is excellent, and the power band is both wide and progressive, exactly the right characteristics for a workhorse. Tromp the gas pedal and the F-150 scoots, reminding me of muscle cars of old because of the axle hop. The only complaint is the amount of induction noise. Push the gas pedal with any enthusiasm and there is a loud roar as the air is drawn into the plenum and distributed to the cylinders. Part of the problem is insulation, or lack thereof, and part of the problem is because the back end of the engine sits underneath the dash panel. There are two transmissions available, a 5-speed manual and a 4-speed automatic with overdrive. From just about every perspective, the latter is the unit of choice. The shifts are smooth and the ratios perfectly match to the engine, providing a happy medium between the need for power and the quest for fuel economy. Stopping power is supplied by a front disc rear drum design with full 4-wheel anti-lock brakes. Now this is an option. The system functions as it should, with the stops being short, straight and controlled. The only minor quibble being the pedal feel. It is on the mushy side, meaning it requires a lot of pressure to yield the appropriate brake effort. Until the advent of the F-150, you couldn't use truck and attractive in the same sentence. Well, now you can. However, that's not to say this truck doesn't have its pros and cons. On the con side, there's nothing to warn you the cruise control is on, and so it's very easy to accidentally set it off. Secondly, the light for the on-off overdrive switch, you can't see it. On a more positive note, power windows right where they should be. Wonderful set of analog instrumentation that wouldn't be out of place in any upscale luxury car. Moving across, switching between 2- and 4-wheel drive is that simple. There's a very user-friendly set of radio and climate controls, a passenger side airbag, but perhaps more importantly, you can turn the airbag off using the ignition key. Why is that valuable? Anybody that's got to carry an infant in a rear-facing child seat can do so in complete safety. In the area of safety, the F-150 again excels. There are side impact members, adjustable upper anchors for the seat belts, a centre high-mounted stop lamp, and of course dual airbags. Well, that's it for this edition of Test Drive. Yes, I know I said no off-roading, but I couldn't resist it. You know, the engineering improvements that Ford have designed into the new F-150 are going to change the way people look at and perceive pickup trucks. Now, while we've concentrated on the rather radical flare side, there is indeed an F-150 for anybody that's in the market for a pickup truck.
You know, every time I see a pickup truck like this Dodge Ram, I think of my buddy Bill Gardner, because as far as Bill's concerned, the pickup truck is the only way to travel. And speaking of Bill, I wonder what his ideal test drive would be. Well, he's standing by in the garage, so Bill, how about it?
Well, Brad, ideally, I'd like to have a vehicle at least overnight or for a 24-hour period to properly test it out. You know, drive it home from work, eyeball it in the driveway that night, drive it to work maybe the next day, or take it for a good cruise on the highway. Because I find just a quick spin around the block quite often doesn't reveal annoyances or problems that you might have with a particular vehicle. And matter of fact, I find that with used cars, when people bring them in complaining of a problem, in many cases I take them around the block for a quick spin with the owner in the passenger seat, and you know, the problem just doesn't raise its head. When I'm least looking for it, that seems to be when the problem occurs, and you certainly don't want to have that situation come up after you've just written a check for 30 grand for a new car. In any case, what I want to talk about this week is a situation that came up on a service call I had to do recently. One of our regular customers called us, said that his alternator light had come on while he was driving that afternoon. He continued to drive the car. He pulled in at a license bureau, shut the car off. When he came back out after renewing his plate stick or whatever, turned the key over and the car wouldn't start. Now, he described this whole situation to me over the phone, and I knew that all I had to do was go there with a fresh, fully charged battery, substitute it in the car, and I could limp the car that half an hour back to my shop in order to repair it and not have to call a tow truck. I get there, and of course he's standing there with the hood release cable in his hand, and he can't even get the hood open. So what I want to talk about this week is how you would deal with a situation just like that. Now, the majority of remote hood release mechanisms consist of very similar hardware. A metal end, something like this, with a plastic coated end inside the car for you to grasp, and a stranded wire inner cable. Now, out underneath the hood of the car and extending all the way to that release handle inside the car is a hard plastic jacket that supports, guides, and protects the cable. And when you replace the hood release cable, you're going to get this entire outer jacket and everything all the way up to the dashboard of the car where you pull on that release handle. So don't be squeamish about having to break or cut this cable inside the car, this outer jacket. You can cut it away with a pair of side cutters. It's hard plastic, but it can be broken away such that you can get at that stranded inner wire cable and grasp it with a pair of pliers in order to release the hood. So that's one way of doing it. Now, out here at the front of the car where the hood latch is, you can see the mechanism right there. That's what it does when you close the hood. And when you get inside the car and pull on the release cable, you're releasing the mechanism in that fashion. Now, in this particular car, the cable comes in from the back, so it's pretty difficult to get underneath the car and release it. Other cars that have the cable coming in the front side of the latch afford you the luxury of being able to reach through the grille and release the mechanism if that cable should break. Now, if you notice telltale signs like a lot of pressure on that release mechanism when you're trying to pop the hood release from inside the car, if it's extremely stiff or difficult, it's trying to tell you something. That mechanism is probably stuck or seized partially, and if you take some aerosol spray lubricant and hit all those moving parts and the end of the cable, it'll likely free up enough that it'll take some of the stress off that cable and lessen the likelihood of you breaking that cable at an inopportune moment. But believe me, when these things break, it's usually a real pain in the neck and you end up pretty dirty by the time you've resolved that problem. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 96.
Concept cars are always a big hit at car shows, and this year's Detroit event was no exception. Ford introduced the Indigo, a street-legal, drivable Indy car.
For those who like Indy cars, it has well over 400 horsepower. It has a V12 engine, 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds, and that vehicle will definitely get the sports enthusiasts excited. The technologies that are on that vehicle could go into production in the not too distant future, but exactly what will happen, you'll have to stay tuned.
Well, the cat is finally out of the bag. Introducing the 1997 Plymouth Prowler.
Not one to be upstaged, Chrysler introduced the Plymouth Prowler. A concept car just 2 years ago, the Prowler will now go into production within the year.
Prowler keeps our sense of focus sharp. Just as with Viper, this is an exercise in polarity. Those who don't get it or don't like it never will, and that's fine with us. But we've done this car for those who do get it, want it, and can't wait to have it.
I think for us at Chrysler, the concept cars have become very significant. When you look at cars that have made it to production, you take a look at the Neon became the Neon, the Viper made it in its entirety, the Prowler became the Prowler, which we're just introducing today. When you look at some of the other concept vehicles where maybe they didn't come per se, but the shape that we were looking at or what we were trying to explore in terms of a new proportion, it definitely gets there. The Cirrus became the Cirrus production vehicle. When you look at Portofino, Millennium, and Optima became the LH vehicles.
Introducing the Dodge Intrepid PSX.
You know, when the team, the engineers, the marketing people, the whole extended community, even some of the suppliers that participate with us, when they see how strong the reaction is to some of the concept vehicles, it says, okay, I can see where that's very important. I can see where this is something maybe we do need to reach for, where otherwise we might have said, well, let's resist this. Let's not maybe try to go quite so far. So I think it causes us to try to reach a little bit further than we might have otherwise done.
Chrysler is hoping the Prowler will save the slumping Plymouth brand. If early interest is any indication, the gamble will pay off. Since its debut, Chrysler said that more than 36,000 potential customers have flooded dealerships seeking more information.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns getting better performance from your vehicle's wiper blades. Next time you're cleaning the exterior glass on your vehicle, when you're finished, try this little trick. Take the towel that you've just used for cleaning the windshield, find a good clean spot on it, and saturate that section with full-strength glass cleaner or washer fluid. Lift up your wiper blade and drag that towel all the way along the edge of the wiping element, clean it off. As a matter of fact, one of the leading wiper manufacturers includes a little wipe towel like this that's saturated with isopropyl alcohol and detergent with each one of their wiper packages. And if you use it on a regular basis and drag it along that wiper element, you'll find it'll come up black like that. That grime that you removed is the difference between mediocre and excellent performance of your car's wiper blades. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Taxi, taxi. Wait a minute, that's a minivan. A New York taxi minivan? Coming up next on Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
If you live in Manhattan, you probably figure all cars are yellow and have lights on the roof. And if you live in Manhattan, you can't believe that Chevrolet is going to be discontinuing the production of the full-size Caprice, because after all, that's all you see here. Now, the New York City Taxi Commissioner has been reaming General Motors executives up one side of the street and down the other. What are we going to do for cabs if they don't have the full-size Caprice? I mean, a couple of guys run Ford Crown Victorias, but frankly, they don't stand up to the kind of punishment that New York can dish out. Some people think the minivan is the answer. There, in fact, is one Honda Odyssey running around the streets of New York as we speak. Hey, when that guy has to replace his power steering pump, his accountant is going to choke. Now, in San Antonio, Texas, they use Dodge Caravans. Every 100,000 miles or so, they drop the front subframe, throw the engine, transmission, suspension away, bolt in a new one, and get another 100,000 miles out of it. But the streets of San Antonio aren't the streets of Fort Apache, the Bronx, if you know what I'm saying. So what are they going to do? Well, you know, I pretty much have an answer for every problem, but this one, hey, I haven't got a clue. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, that's it for this week. Now, what have we learned about the test drive? Well, hopefully we've learned that the more time you can spend in the vehicle, the better. And personally, I would find a dealer who would give you a second test drive without the salesman. I mean, who's signing the check anyway? Well, that's it for now. We'll see you next week for more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
Well, in all my years in this business, I don't think I've ever come across a situation where somebody had really a good story to tell and refused to talk to us.
And the next thing I know, when I'm coming down the hill, this golf cart blocks me off in like true police style. And he was just like ranting and raving, I need to have that tape. So I said, well, no, you can't have my tape.
We want to tell an interesting story about something that could revolutionize the used car business. And God knows the used car business needs all the help it can get.
TSN's Motoring 96 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Exceeds the highest standards for engine protection. And Midas, the way it should be.
We're just